For the News and Observer, I'm Dawn Baumgartner, your host for this episode of Under the Dome for the week of Monday, May 1st, 2023. I'm here today with my politics team colleagues, Luciana, Perez, Uribe, Guinassi, and the newest member of our politics team, Korie, who's moved over from another beat here in the NNO newsroom to cover higher education, which, as all our listeners know, has political factors in it as well. So this past week was another busy one at the General Assembly. This coming week will be another busy one at the General Assembly. The reason for that is the crossover deadline of May 4th. So may the 4th be with you for crossover. Crossover means a bill needs to pass at least one chamber to be considered this session, with exceptions for bills like the budget or bills that we'll find out as a surprise later and get an amend. But in general, most bills have to get through crossover. But before we get to crossover, let's talk about the 3 North Carolina Supreme Court decisions that came down Friday. Just as we are recording earlier, a now scrapped version of the podcast, those decisions came down on Friday. We haven't yet all read the over 400 pages of the decisions, but we at least know the gist. And so here it is. The Supreme Court, for those of you that don't know, is majority Republican now. It was majority Democrat before. 2 rulings were made in December during that lame duck time of the majority Democratic Supreme Court. Now the majority Republican Supreme Court said, here's our turn to reverse basically what you did. So they reversed 2 decisions on redistricting and voter ID, and issued a 3rd ruling denying voting rights for some people convicted of felonies. So let's see, the 2018 voter ID law was struck down by the court in December, saying it was racially discriminatory. A lower court had restored voting rights to people convicted of felonies who are out of prison but remain under state supervision. And then as far as the maps go, it looks like we're going to see redrawn congressional maps, which is significant because right now it's 7-7 Democrats and Republicans, and there's probably a good chance it won't be like that after they're redrawn. So that's a really quick recap. As I said, it's 400 some pages. Luciana, you looked a little more into what the decision was about people convicted of felonies. So what does this mean?
Yeah, so the Supreme Court reversed a trial court ruling, which gave people convicted of felonies who were serving sentences and who had any court fees pending to pay the right to vote while serving those sentences. And so they essentially reversed that trial court ruling, which means that thousands of people could lose the right to vote. And yeah, that's the gist of that. And yeah.
All right. So as you can tell by us talking on Friday, we're mid-writing all these explainer stories of exactly what this means. But of course, we wanted to make sure you have something to listen to on your drive to Raleigh on Monday for those lawmakers who aren't in the Triangle area. And if you thought you didn't have anything to do until Tuesday, well, surprise, you better get here because House Judiciary is meeting at 3 o'clock on Monday, and there are several bills: Community Association Oversight Division, Respiratory Care Modernization Act, Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act, Healthcare Practitioner Transparency Act, and twice as many as that. And then the Senate, there's education. Higher education meets at 4, so if you're in that chamber, better get to Raleigh. You have something to do today. Or if you don't listen to this till Tuesday, you're late and you missed your meeting. And the Senate rules and voting session. So Korie, you've been thrown in immediately to higher ed, not much of a segue. So you've already covered some things this past week. So what's already been moving recently?
Yeah, so I covered 2 House bills this week. One is House Bill 607, which kind of takes a UNC Board of Governors policy that passed in February and would extend it to the state's community colleges. So it deals with what the Board of Governors are calling compelled speech, and that's just kind of the idea that in hiring or in admissions practices, universities and colleges would not be able to ask applicants about their opinions, beliefs, views on, quote, matters of contemporary political debate or social action. So kind of broad, but people, opponents kind of say it could target diversity, questions about diversity. The proponents of it say that it would kind of make the processes better for conservative students, conservative employees who would not be, required to say whether they agree with certain political opinions. So that was in committee this week, got a favorable report, and then another House Bill 715 that was supposed to be heard in committee this week, but it was pulled from the calendar. So still trying to see where that's going or what will happen. But that would, among several other things, eliminate tenure for future faculty hired at colleges and universities. So faculty say that tenure protects academic freedom. So they're worried about having that potentially eliminated. So, and then looking ahead to next week, Senate Bill, I think it's 692, the Community College Governance Bill, will be in committee. And I know that, Luciana, you've covered that more than I have since we've been in a little bit of a transition. But that's another higher ed bill and topic to look forward to.
Before we get to community colleges, the two things with the compelled speech and tenure are a lot about hiring. People, of course, know that's the vacancy rate for state employees across North Carolina is getting incrementally bigger over the past few years, has not bounced back from the pandemic, and it's more than 20%. And a lot of that is state agencies. Are you hearing anything about how these changes will make it easier, harder to hire and to recruit, and retention? Or is there any thoughts on that from people that are already working there or trying to get people to work there?
So specifically regarding tenure, I talked to two professors at UNC this week who said that eliminating tenure would make it very difficult to attract faculty. That's an attractive offering for faculty when they're looking for a job because it, provides job security, allows them to, teach about topics that might be viewed as controversial. So, the faculty I talked to said that it would kind of make the, public colleges in North Carolina a bit of a pariah, that people wouldn't want to come here. And they said the bill, as it's written currently, wouldn't affect faculty who currently have tenure, but, I think that there's obviously a worry among faculty that, that might be next, or that they, still might, or that they might feel less comfortable teaching topics that they do now, even if they have tenure. So, at least from the faculty perspective, seems like it'll affect that.
I'm sure we'll hear a lot more from faculty as this moves ahead or doesn't move ahead. As I was saying, earlier with crossover, as far as things getting through the chamber, the deadline is a self-imposed deadline. So there's always a way to put something in later in the session. And another thing that'll come up before the Senate budget comes out in a couple weeks is pay. And the university system employees, community college system employees, teachers, rank and file state employees always want to know about how much that they're getting. And the House budget had higher raises than they usually give. Of course, not as high as Cooper wants, because Democrats generally support higher raises than Republicans do, but the House supports higher raises than the Senate. So if the Senate comes out with these lowballed raises and then these other factors, we'll see how that plays with workers, existing workers and workers that want to come. So we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Luciana will talk a little bit more about the community colleges bill we just mentioned, and then we will share our picks for headliner of the week. You're listening to Under the Dome. I'm News and Observer State Capitol Bureau Chief Dawn Baumgartner, here with my colleagues Luciana, Perez, Uribe, Guinassi, and Korie Dean. If you missed that at the intro, again, Korie Dean is our new higher education reporter and on the politics team, since there's plenty to make a crossover joke, crossover between higher education and politics. So speaking of crossover and things that are moving ahead, what's this about community colleges that you were going to talk about?
Yeah, so Senate Bill 692, it would allow the legislature to get more say in how the community college system is governed. Specifically, it would give them the final say on who is elected the community college president, as well as allow them to get more appointments into the state board and take those appointments from the governor. It also takes some power from local boards, local community college boards of trustees, and gives more appointments to the legislature as well. So it's kind of a shift around of just who gets control of decisions.
So the usual legislature wants more power and wants the governor to have less power. Kind of what's different at play this time is that it was more or less like targeted directly to Roy Cooper in the past, but since Cooper is not going to be around much longer, it's either targeted to Josh Stein if he becomes governor from the Democrats, or Republicans if it's Robinson or Folwell or Walker. But the end is always the legislature wants more power. And as Republicans have pointed out, when they do this, that's how North Carolina should be set up, that the legislature should have more power than the governor, but that's also people in the legislature saying that. So,
and former governors filed a letter basically saying that, they shouldn't be putting so much power into the legislature and taking it from the governor. So it's kind of a debated topic, and the bill was pulled last week from the Senate floor, then pulled from a committee, and now is being rescheduled. So it's going to be interesting to hear kind of what were some concerns potentially in that bill. All
right. So let's get to our picks for headliner of the week. I don't know if this is Korie, your inaugural headliner. We had an episode after election night that Korie was on that listeners will know, where you talked about how you had to sit outside. Was it the Bo Hines election night event? Yeah. So great moments in podcast recap history. So I don't remember your headliner then, but you want to go first for what is your headliner of the week?
Yeah, it kind of sticks with the theme, obviously, since I'm covering higher education now. We've talked a lot about community colleges on this podcast today, but my headliner is that the North Carolina community college system has a new president. The state board appointed Jeff Cox, who is the current president of Wilkes Community College in Western North Carolina. That happened, I think it was last Friday, if my memory serves me correctly. And then there was also a press conference this past Monday with Governor Roy Cooper and State Superintendent Catherine Truitt, among others, just welcoming him formally to the job. I think it's an exciting time for the community colleges. He's been in education for like 3 decades as a principal, a teacher, superintendent. So, that is my headliner, that the community college system has a new president. He'll start on July 1st. So.
Okay, maybe the legislature will be out by then, but maybe not. With legislative time, you mentioned not knowing when things happen. Legislative time is like a whole space-age time warp of...
My family always asks me, when is the session going to be done? I'm like,
It's like, who knows? Other states have that. North Carolina does not. So, all right, Luciana, what is your headliner?
So I feel like every time I'm on here, I pick just random headliners. Mine is just literally all the rainy weekends. I'm very displeased about it. I like to go on hikes. I want to start cleaning up.
So, all right, Luciana, what is your headliner?
So I feel like every time I'm on here, I pick just random headliners. Mine is just literally all the rainy weekends. I'm very displeased about it. I like to go on hikes. I want to start cleaning up my garden, and now it's snake season, so it's kind of ruined it for me. So yeah, just the rainy weekends.
You kind of threw snake season in there.
Yeah. Basically, I wanted to rake underneath my house and get my garden ready before it became snake season. But because it was raining every weekend, I couldn't. So not pleased.
I saw on Twitter that it's rained, I think, 15 of the 17 weekends so far in Raleigh this year. So that's a lot of rain.
Yeah.
All right.
Always timed for the weekend.
Yep.
All right, weather, stop being a bummer. We have stuff to do. So my headliner is newsy. Like I said, we're recording this Friday, and our schedules got all thrown off. So it looks like we were not able to cover this. But I wanted to let people know Representative Justin Pearson, who's one of the Tennessee 3 state lawmakers that were briefly booted from their legislative seats in Tennessee, their legislature. Pearson was in town as we're recording this, so the end of this past week, to speak at the North Carolina Black Alliances Summit. And he, I guess in the context of North Carolina, could something similar like what happened there happen here? I would say probably not. I don't think so, or a version of that. But you never know. That's what makes the legislature fun. There's a bit more decorum involved, even when there's not decorum involved, as far as how they treat each other. So I think if somebody tried to boot someone from, I don't think that would go over very well. And those of you who remember the House budget veto override from 2019 with Representative Deb Butler and Speaker Moore, they're both still here and still talking and pretty cordial, more or less. So nobody got taken out, and things so far have been, relatively friendly still.
Yeah, they've been relatively cordial.
Yeah, so we'll see if that lasts or not. All right, for Luciana and Korie and me, I'm Dawn Baumgartner, the News and Observer. Thanks for listening. Happy crossover week, and we'll talk to you next time.